The first thing she was aware of was the scent. Cedarwood, cold night air, and something else. Something uniquely masculine and dangerous. The second was the fabric beneath her cheek. Silk, impossibly smooth and cool against her skin. Her eyes fluttered open, greeted not by familiar surroundings, but by the dim, cavernous space of a bedroom that seemed carved from shadow and moonlight. A single floor-to-ceiling window revealed a landscape of snow-dusted pines under a stark, starry sky. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the fog in her mind. She tried to sit up, but a heavy weight across her waist held her down. It was an arm corded with muscle, draped over her with an air of absolute possession. Her gaze followed the line of that arm to a man sleeping beside her. He was turned away from her, his broad back a landscape of sculpted strength even in repose. His hair was dark, shot through with startling streaks of silver at the temples, cut with military precision. Where was she? Who was this man? She tried to search her memory, to find a name, a face, a reason for being here, but found only a terrifying, hollow void. There was nothing. No past, no identity, just a primal fear that was beginning to choke her. She had to get away. Slowly, carefully, she lifted his arm, her fingers brushing against the cool metal of a ring on his finger. It felt heavy, final. Inch by inch, she slid from the bed, her bare feet meeting the cold, polished stone of the floor. The chill was a shock, but it helped to clear her head. A silk robe lay discarded on a severe-looking leather armchair. She pulled it on, her hands trembling as she cinched the belt. The room was vast and minimalist, furnished with dark wood and steel. It felt less like a bedroom and more like the private quarters of a king or a warden. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she crept towards the heavy oak door. Her hand was just inches from the cold metal handle when a voice, low and gravelly, cut through the silence. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Alara." She froze, her back rigid. The name meant nothing to her, yet he said it with such casual authority. She turned slowly. He was sitting up in the bed now, the silk sheets pooled around his waist, revealing a chest defined by discipline and littered with the faint, silvery lines of old scars. His eyes, the color of a winter storm, were fixed on her. He wasn't angry. He was watching, observing her like a strategist observing a new piece on the board. Who are you?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "Where am I?" He rose from the bed in a single fluid movement, completely unconcerned with his state of undress. He was tall, powerfully built, a man forged in conflict. He moved towards her, not with menace, but with an unnerving, deliberate grace that was somehow more intimidating. "I am General Kalen," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the floor. "And this is our home." He stopped a few feet from her, his stormy eyes scanning her face, missing nothing. "You were in an accident. The doctors said you might have some memory loss." An accident. The word echoed in the empty space of her mind, but it conjured no images, no pain. "Our home?" she repeated, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. I don't remember you." A flicker of something, pain, frustration, crossed his features before being locked down behind a mask of cold control. "I know, but I remember you," he said, his voice softening almost imperceptibly. "I remember everything." He took another step, closing the distance between them. He reached out, his hand hovering for a moment before his fingers gently brushed her cheek. His touch was a strange combination of ice and fire, a calloused thumb tracing the line of her jaw. It should have felt threatening, but instead a bizarre sense of familiarity stirred within her, a ghost of a feeling. "You are Ilara," he repeated, his gaze intense, possessive. "My wife." Wife. The word hung in the air, a declaration that felt like a sentence. She looked into his eyes, searching for a lie. for some sign of deception, but found only a conviction so absolute it terrified her. She wanted to scream, to run, to deny it, but her body felt rooted to the spot, held captive by his unwavering stare. I need some air, she stammered, pulling back from his touch. The balcony is this way, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He gestured toward a set of glass doors she hadn't noticed before. He followed her as she walked, his presence a heavy weight behind her. The cold that hit her on the balcony was brutal, biting at her exposed skin. The vast, silent forest stretched out before them, a sea of black and white under the moon. It was beautiful and desolate. She wrapped her arms around herself, a fragile defense against the cold and the man standing beside her. How long were we married? She asked, her voice barely a whisper against the wind. 5 years, he answered without hesitation. 5 years, and I almost lost you. He moved to stand behind her, his body acting as a shield against the wind. His heat enveloped her, and despite her fear, she found herself leaning back into it, a desperate, instinctual search for warmth. You're safe now, he murmured, his lips close to her ear. His hands came to rest on her arms, his grip firm, proprietary. You're mine now, Ilara, and I'll never let you go. The words were meant to be a comfort, a promise. But in the desolate silence of the night, surrounded by an endless forest and a past she could not recall, they sounded like a vow of captivity. A cold dread washed over her. He wasn't just a husband nursing his wife back to health. He was a general securing his most prized possession. And as she stood there, a prisoner in his arms, she felt the first terrifying suspicion that the accident hadn't been an accident at all, and that the greatest danger wasn't in the past she'd forgotten, but in the man holding her as if he'd sooner see the world burn than lose her again. She felt the cool metal of his ring press against her arm, a silent brand. A shiver that had nothing to do with the cold ran down her spine. A single fragmented image flashed in her mind, not of him, but of running, of desperate fear, and the sound of a child's cry. Then it was gone, leaving only the chilling certainty that this powerful, cold man was hiding a secret far more dangerous than her lost memory. The days that followed blurred into a suffocating routine. Kalen was a constant, shadow-like presence. He called her Ilara with a possessive tenderness that made her skin crawl. He told her stories of their life together, of a whirlwind romance, a swift marriage, of a love so profound it was the envy of all who knew them. He spoke of her favorite foods, her love for classical music, her supposed passion for painting the very wilderness that now felt like the walls of her prison. She listened, nodded, and tried to feel something, anything that connected her to the woman he described. But his words were like a well-rehearsed script, and the woman in his stories felt like a stranger. The house, their supposed home, was a gilded cage. It was immaculate, sterile, and cold. There were no photographs, no personal trinkets, no chaotic signs of a life lived. It was a showroom, not a home shared by a couple deeply in love. Her attempts to reclaim her past were gently but firmly stonewalled. When she asked for photo albums, Kalen would say they were destroyed in the fire that caused the accident. When she asked about friends or family, he would tell her, his voice laced with a carefully manufactured sadness, that she was an orphan and had cut ties with her few friends after they married, wanting only him. Every question had an answer, every doubt a smooth, plausible explanation that only served to isolate her further. One afternoon, while Kalen was away on what he called urgent military business, she began to explore. The house was vast, a labyrinth of echoing halls and stark, imposing rooms. Fear was a constant companion, but a new feeling was beginning to take root beneath it: defiance. She found herself in a library, walls lined with books from floor to ceiling. It was the one room that felt lived in. A heavy mahogany desk sat by the window, and curiosity pulled her toward it. The drawers were unlocked. The first few held official-looking documents, maps, and military papers stamped with crests she didn't recognize. But in the bottom drawer, tucked beneath a stack of leather-bound journals, was a small, velvet box. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded satin, was a delicate silver locket. It wasn't hers. She felt no connection to it. But she knew, with an instinct she couldn't explain, that it was important. She clicked it open. On one side was a miniature portrait of a woman who looked strikingly like her, but she was smiling, a genuine, unguarded smile that felt alien. On the other side, however, was not a picture of Kaylin. It was a picture of a different man, handsome, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. And cradled in the woman's arms was a small baby, wrapped in a blue blanket. A wave of dizziness washed over her. She gripped the edge of the desk, her knuckles white. A name surfaced from the void, a whisper in her mind. Liam. The sound of the front door opening sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through her. Kaylin was back, early. She snapped the locket shut, shoved it back into the box, and buried it under the journals just as his heavy footsteps approached the library. She spun around, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, trying to school her features into a mask of placid confusion. He filled the doorway, his powerful frame eclipsing the light from the hall. His stormy eyes immediately swept the room, and she knew with sickening certainty that he could sense the shift in the atmosphere. His gaze landed on her, then flickered to the desk. "Finding something interesting?" he asked, his voice deceptively light. I was just looking at the books," she lied, her voice thin. He walked towards her, his movements slow, predatory. He didn't stop until he was standing directly in front of her, forcing her to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. He was so close she could feel the cold radiating from him. He lifted a hand and tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers deliberately brushing the frantic pulse in her neck. "Lying doesn't suit you, Alara," he said softly, his voice a chilling caress. "I can always tell." Her breath hitched. She couldn't tear her eyes away from his, trapped in their stormy depths. He knew. He didn't know what she'd found, but he knew she'd been searching. "I don't understand any of this," she whispered, a genuine plea mixed with her fear. "This place, none of it feels real." For the first time, the mask of cold control slipped. A raw, desperate emotion flared in his eyes. It was the look of a man clinging to something by a thread. "It is real," he insisted, his voice dropping to a fierce, guttural tone. He gripped her shoulders, his fingers digging into her flesh. Not enough to hurt, but enough to hold her, to brand her. "I am real. What we have is real. I will make you remember." "Let go of me," she said, her voice shaking but firm. He stared at her for a long moment, a battle raging in his eyes. Then, as if exerting a monumental effort of will, he released her. He stepped back, the mask slamming back into place. "Forgive me," he said, his voice once again a flat, controlled monotone. "I'm not used to being gentle. It's been a long time since I've had something to protect." The words hung between them, another layer of his suffocating possessiveness. Later that night, as she lay beside him in the cold, cavernous bedroom, feigning sleep, she felt his weight shift. He rose and walked to the window, staring out at the snow-covered pines. In the pale moonlight, she saw his shoulders slump, the rigid military posture dissolving into something that looked like unbearable grief. He thought she was sleeping, thought he was unobserved. He raised a hand and pressed it against the cold glass, his whole body trembling with a silent, contained agony. "I can't lose you again, Lyra," he whispered, the name a ghost in the silent room. Not Ilara, Lyra. The wrong name was a key turning a lock in her mind. Another fragment of memory burst through the fog. The child's cry from before, but this time it had a voice, a word. Mama. It was a little boy's voice, crying for her, crying for Lyra. The locket, the man with the kind eyes, the baby. It wasn't her. It couldn't be. But as she lay there, listening to the quiet, desperate sorrow of the general who called her by the wrong name, she knew with chilling certainty that she was not Alara. She was someone else entirely. And she had a child. A child who was out there somewhere, crying for a mother who didn't even know his name. The realization was not a relief. It was a new, more profound kind of terror. Because if she wasn't Kalen's wife, then who was she? And what had he done to the real Alara? The name Lyra echoed in the silent chambers of her mind, a single, defiant bell in a city of fog. Lyra. And with the name came the ghost of a feeling, the phantom weight of a small child in her arms, the warmth of a tiny hand clutching her finger. Leo. The name came on a whisper of instinct. Leo, her son. A new kind of fire began to burn beneath her icy fear. It was rage, pure and potent. This man, this General Kalen, had not just stolen her present. He had erased her past and taken her child. She was no longer just a lost woman. She was a mother, and that made her dangerous. She knew she couldn't fight him with force. He was a fortress of muscle and control, so she would fight him with his own weapon, deception. She would become Alara. She would be the devoted, confused wife he so desperately wanted her to be. And she would use his obsession as a key to unlock the cage he had built around her. The next morning, she didn't shy away from his touch. When he handed her a cup of coffee, she let her fingers brush against his, holding his gaze for a fraction longer than usual. I think I remember this, she said, her voice a soft, hesitant murmur. The way you make coffee. Strong. Just a little cream. She had watched him make it every morning. It was a simple guess, a shot in the dark, but it hit its mark. The ever-present tension in his shoulders eased. A flicker of something that looked dangerously like hope ignited in his stormy eyes. Yes, he said, his voice rough with emotion. That's right, just how you like it. It was that easy. A single well-placed lie, and a crack appeared in his armor. She spent the next few days seeding these false memories, small details she gleaned from his stories or her own observations. She mentioned remembering a walk they supposedly took by a frozen lake, a book he once read to her. Each feigned recollection made him softer, more open. He started talking more, not just about their fabricated past, but about himself. He spoke of a lonely, rigid life before her, of how she had been a flash of color in his monochrome world. She listened, her heart a cold stone in her chest, filing away every piece of information. One evening, he led her to a grand piano in a forgotten corner of the house. Dust motes danced in the moonlight slanting through the window. I used to play for you, he said, his voice quiet. You said it was the only thing that could calm the storm in me. He sat down and his powerful, scarred hands began to move across the keys. The melody that filled the cavernous room was not harsh or militaristic, but achingly sad and beautiful. It was a melody she knew, not from him, but from somewhere deep inside her. The music was a key. The dam in her mind cracked, and a memory, vivid and warm, flooded through. Sunlight streamed through the window of a small, cozy kitchen. The air smelled of cinnamon and fresh bread. A man with kind, laughing eyes, Liam, was dancing with her, his arms wrapped securely around her waist as he hummed a clumsy, off-key tune. A little boy with a mop of dark curls, her curls, was giggling from his perch on Liam's feet, his tiny hands clinging to his father's trousers. Again, Daddy, again! Leo shrieked with delight. Liam had looked at her over their son's head, his eyes so full of love it was a physical force. "You see, Lyra?" he'd murmured, his lips brushing her temple. "A perfect day." The vision was so real, so tangible, that she gasped, stumbling backward. The warmth of it was a brutal contrast to the cold, opulent silence of Kaylin's house. Tears streamed down her face, tears of loss so profound they stole her breath. Kaylin stopped playing instantly. He was beside her in a second, his hands on her arms, his face a mask of alarm. "Ilara, what is it? What did you remember?" She looked at him, her vision blurred by tears, and for a moment she saw not the kidnapper, but the desperately lonely man he'd revealed himself to be. A man so broken he would steal someone else's life to fix his own. The complexity of it was dizzying. "The music," she choked out, latching onto the lie. "It was beautiful and sad." His grip on her arms gentled. He pulled her against his chest, holding her in a way that was both possessive and strangely protective. His body was rigid, as if he were fighting a war with himself. "I wrote it for you," he whispered into her hair, and she could feel the tremor that ran through him. "The day I realized I would do anything, anything at all, to keep you." The confession hung in the air, a vow of terrifying devotion. He was confessing his love for a woman she wasn't, a love built on a foundation of heinous crimes. She let him hold her, her body stiff and cold in his embrace, her mind racing. This moment of vulnerability was an opportunity. Later, when he believed her to be asleep, emotionally exhausted from her breakthrough, she slipped out of the bed. The library called to her. Armed with the name Liam, she moved with a new purpose. She went straight to the bottom drawer of his desk. The velvet box was still there, but she ignored it. Her fingers searched deeper, past the journals, and hit the edge of a thin manila folder. Her name, Lyra Collins, was typed on the tab. With trembling hands, she pulled it out. Inside, the first thing she saw was a photograph. It was the three of them. Her, Liam, and little Leo, smiling on a sunny beach. The perfect day from her memory. Seeing her son's face so clearly, his bright, innocent smile, was a physical blow. A choked sob escaped her lips. Behind the photo was a single folded document. It was official, stamped and sealed. She unfolded it. Her eyes scanned the formal text, the cold, bureaucratic words that felt like daggers. It was a certificate of death. Name of deceased, Liam Collins. Date of death, 6 months ago. Cause of death, accidental structural fire. Location, rural farmhouse, West Creek. The air left her lungs. An accidental fire. The same story Kaylin had concocted to explain her amnesia and the loss of their phantom photo albums. It was all a lie. A calculated, monstrous lie. He hadn't just taken her, he had taken everything. He had murdered her husband, stolen her child, and set fire to her entire world, leaving her to awaken in the ashes, believing they were hers. The world didn't shatter, it solidified. The hazy, confusing fog of her amnesia burned away, replaced by the terrible, sharp clarity of the truth. Liam was dead, murdered. Her son, her little Leo, was somewhere, in the hands of the man who had destroyed her life. The grief was a physical thing, a crushing weight in her chest that threatened to suffocate her, but she couldn't afford to feel it. Not yet. Grief was a luxury for the free. For now, there was only the cold, hard diamond of her rage. She slid the file back into its place, her movements unnaturally steady. She closed the drawer, walked out of the library, and glided up the stairs. Every step was deliberate. She was no longer a lost, frightened bird in a cage. She was a hunter, and she was learning the scent of her prey. When she slipped back into the bed, Kaylin stirred, turning to her in his sleep. His arm came around her waist, pulling her against the hard warmth of his body. The touch that had once been confusing and intimidating was now repulsive. She was lying in the arms of her husband's killer. She forced her body to remain pliant, to feign the relaxed breathing of sleep, while every muscle screamed to recoil, to claw, to fight. She lay there for hours, staring into the darkness, forging her grief into a weapon. Her new strategy began at breakfast. She looked Kaylin directly in the eye, a soft, searching expression on her face. "I had a dream last night," she began, her voice carefully modulated to sound fragile. "It was clearer than the others." He stopped, a cup of coffee halfway to his lips. His stormy eyes narrowed, instantly wary. "What did you dream of, Elara?" "Fire," she said, letting a tremor enter her voice. "And smoke. I remember the heat. And your voice. You were calling my name." She reached across the table, her fingers gently touching the back of his hand. "You saved me, didn't you? That's what you told me." He put his cup down, his hand turning to capture hers. His thumb stroked her knuckles. "I pulled you from the wreckage," he said, his voice a low, possessive rumble. "I would have walked through hell itself to get to you." The sincerity in his voice was sickening. He believed his own twisted narrative. "Tell me," she whispered, leaning forward. "I need to know. I need to understand what we lost." He recounted the story, the same smooth, practiced lies as before. A faulty wire, a spark in the night. He spoke of the heroism, the desperate rescue, the tragedy of losing their home and all their possessions. She listened, her heart a frozen stone, her face a perfect mask of a wife struggling to piece together a shared trauma. She watched his mouth form the words that described the fire that had incinerated the love of her life, and she didn't flinch. "Was there anyone else there?" she asked, the question a delicate probe. His eyes went cold. "No, it was just us. We were beautifully isolated." She held his gaze, letting tears well in her eyes. "It's strange," she said, her voice cracking, "because in the dream, I keep hearing something else. A child's cry." The change in him was instantaneous and profound. The possessive tenderness vanished, replaced by a glacial stillness. The air in the room dropped 10 degrees. "The mind plays tricks after a trauma," he said, his voice flat, devoid of all emotion. There was no child. "But it felt so real," she pushed, pressing the advantage his vulnerability offered. She pulled her hand back, wrapping her arms around herself. "I feel this emptiness, Kaylin. A hollow space inside me, like a part of me is missing. I dream of a little boy with dark curly hair. My hair." His jaw clenched so tight a muscle jumped. He stood up, the chair scraping harshly against the stone floor. He stalked around the table to her, pulling her to her feet. He gripped her arms, his fingers digging in, a painful reminder of his strength. "There was no child," he bit out, his face inches from hers. "It was you and me, only us. I will not have you inventing ghosts to haunt what we have." The fury in his eyes was terrifying, but beneath it, she saw a flash of something else, pure, animal panic. She had hit a nerve, a vital one. Instead of fighting, she collapsed against him, burying her face in his chest, forcing herself to sob. "I'm sorry," she cried, her body shaking with manufactured grief. "I'm so sorry. It just hurts so much, not knowing what's real." His anger warred with his obsession. The need to control, to soothe, to be her sole comfort won out. His arms, which had been holding her like a vice, gentled, pulling her into a crushing embrace. "Shh," he murmured into her hair, his body a rigid wall of conflict. "I am what's real. I am all you need. I will protect you from these nightmares. I will keep you safe." He held her there for a long time. She let him, playing the part of the broken woman soothed by her protector. But over his shoulder, her eyes were open, cold and calculating. And that's when she saw it. His phone, left on the table, lit up with a notification. It was there for only a second before the screen went dark, but she saw the name. Dr. Eris. And the first line of the message, Leo's fever has broken. He is asking for... The rest was cut off. It was all she needed. Leo. He was alive. He was sick, or had been. And he was with someone named Dr. Eris. The name was a key, a destination. Her rage now had a target. That night, as he slept, she slipped away again. Not to the library, but to his study. A smaller, more personal office she hadn't dared enter before. She knew it was a risk, but she had to find out who Dr. Eris was. His laptop was on the desk. Password protected, of course. She tried a few simple guesses. Alara, his own name, military designations? Nothing. Then she remembered the music, the sad, beautiful melody he had written for her. It was the one piece of genuine emotion she had seen from him. What would he call it? He was a man of no poetry, only possession. She typed in the password, My Lyra. It unlocked. The screen glowed in the dark, silent room, illuminating the stark truth. It was all there, laid out in meticulously organized folders. Encrypted emails to a man named Dr. Eris detailed the construction of a private, state-of-the-art medical facility on the estate's northernmost edge. They spoke of a special patient, a young boy who required round-the-clock care following smoke inhalation. A boy named Leo. Her son was here, on this very property, just out of reach. A separate folder, cryptically labeled Contingency, held the real story. It was a complete surveillance file on her and Liam. Photos of them in the park, at the grocery store, laughing in their small garden. Notes in Kaylin's curt, observational style detailed Liam's work schedule, his habits, his inadequacies. He had judged Liam and found him wanting. He had watched her for months, his obsession growing like a cancer, until he decided to simply take her. The fire wasn't a crime of passion, it was a tactical operation. She felt a wave of nausea, but pushed it down, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She needed a map, a layout of the estate. She found it in a file detailing security patrols. The medical wing was a kilometer away, through a dense patch of the forest, impenetrable on foot in the dark and snow. She needed a car, keys, a way out. I knew I'd find you here. The voice was quiet, almost conversational, but it hit her with the force of a physical blow. She froze, her hands hovering over the keyboard. Slowly, she turned in the chair. Kaylin stood in the doorway, not in his usual severe suits, but in a simple black t-shirt and trousers, as if he'd been unable to sleep. There was no surprise on his face, only a deep, chilling disappointment. His gaze flickered from her face to the illuminated screen, taking in the open files. The last of his pretense fell away, leaving behind the raw, predatory obsession that had been lurking there all along. So you remember, he stated. It wasn't a question. She rose from the chair, her spine straight, her fear a block of ice in her stomach. My name is Lyra, she said, her voice low and steady. And you murdered my husband. He took a step into the room, his stormy eyes never leaving hers. Liam was an obstacle, he said, his voice completely devoid of remorse. He was weak. He couldn't have protected you. He couldn't have given you the world you deserve. I can. The world I deserve? A prison? She shot back, her voice shaking with repressed fury. You burn my life to the ground and call it a rescue? I saved you! He roared, the sound echoing in the silent house. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, his hands slamming down on the desk on either side of her, trapping her. His face was a mask of furious conviction. I saw you and I knew. You were meant for more than that small life, that small man. You were meant for power, for strength, for me. You're insane, she breathed, horrified by the depths of his delusion. I'm devoted, he corrected, his voice dropping to a fierce, possessive whisper. I have been searching for you my entire life, Lyra, a center to my world. I will not let you go. All the pieces clicked into place. his loneliness, his control, his violent possessiveness. He wasn't just a kidnapper, he was a zealot, and she was his religion. And in that moment, she knew she couldn't fight his madness with reason. She had to use it. "Where is he?" she demanded, her tone shifting from rage to something else, a desperate, maternal plea. "Where is my son?" "He is safe," Kalen said, his eyes scanning her face, searching for the Alara he had tried to create. "He is being cared for. He is my son now, too." "He is not your son!" she screamed, the sound tearing from her throat. She saw him flinch, a crack in his armor. She pressed on, her voice dropping, becoming calculated, seductive. "You want me, Kalen. Not some ghost named Alara. You want me, Lyra, the woman you saw in the park, the mother of that child." He stared at her, his breathing harsh. She had his full attention. "You can't have one without the other," she continued, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was walking a razor's edge. "You can keep me here forever. You can lock every door, but my mind, my soul, will always be with him. I will hate you with every breath I take." She saw the flicker of pain in his eyes. It was a direct hit to his fantasy. "But," she said, letting the word hang in the air. She reached up, her trembling hand touching his cheek. He was stone, but he didn't pull away. "Let me see him. Let me be his mother, and I will try." "Try what?" he growled, his suspicion warring with a desperate, pathetic hope. "To be yours," she whispered, the words tasting like poison. "I will be your wife. I will stand by your side. I will give you the devotion you want. This child, he is the key. Prove to me that you can protect him, that you can be a father to him, and I will be the woman you need." She leaned in, her lips almost brushing his. "I vow to you. Let me have my son, and I will give you myself." It was the most terrifying gamble of her life. She was offering him the very thing he had killed for, bartering her soul for her son's safety. He stared at her for an eternity, his stormy eyes searching for the lie. He saw only the fierce, unwavering truth of a mother's love, and in his twisted mind, he mistook it for a devotion he could claim. He straightened up, pulling her with him. His decision was made. "I'll protect you both," he said, the words a solemn, binding promise. "Even if it costs me everything." He led her from the house, into the biting cold of the pre-dawn air. A black, armored vehicle was waiting. The journey was short, silent, ending before a low, modern building she hadn't known existed. Inside, the sterile scent of antiseptic filled the air. A man in a doctor's coat, Dr. Eris, nodded grimly at Kalen, his eyes full of fear. Kalen led her to a single door. "He's in here," he said. She pushed the door open, her heart threatening to beat its way out of her chest. The room was dim, filled with the quiet beep of a monitor, and there, in a small bed, was Leo. He was sleeping, his small face pale, his dark curls matted with sweat. But he was breathing. He was real. He was alive. A sob she couldn't contain escaped her. She rushed to his side, her hands hovering over him, afraid to touch, to break the spell. She gently brushed the hair from his forehead. His skin was cool. The fever had broken. "Mama?" His eyes fluttered open, sleepy, confused, but they knew her. He whispered the word, his voice raspy. "I'm here, baby," she wept, gathering him into her arms, burying her face in his hair, breathing in the scent of her child. "Mama's here. I'm never leaving you again." He clung to her, his small arms wrapping around her neck. She held him tight, the missing piece of her soul slotting back into place. Over her son's small, warm body, she looked up. Kalen was standing in the doorway, watching them. His face was unreadable, but in his eyes she saw the triumphant gleam of a conqueror who believed he had just won his prize. He thought he had her. He thought he had his family. But as she held her son, Lyra made a second, silent vow. She had played his game and won the first move. She had her son back. Now they would survive. And one day she would not just escape his cage, she would burn it to the ground.